She was just 12 years old, digging through the mud of an abandoned cottage no one dared touch, when her fingers hit something cold and metal that would uncover $260 million and a secret powerful enough to change everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to smash that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The rain hammered the tin roof of the trailer so hard it sounded like fists pounding to get in. Maya Carter pressed her face against the foggy window, watching water pour from the gutters in thick sheets, turning their small dirt yard into a lake of mud. She was 12 years old, small for her age, with dark hair she cut herself every few months, and eyes that carried weight no child should have to hold. Behind her, in the only bedroom the trailer had, her grandmother coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that made Maya's stomach twist into knots. "Grandma?" Maya called softly, turning from the window. "I'm all right, baby," came the weak reply, though they both knew it was a lie. Ruby Carter was 73 years old, and every one of those years had been hard. She'd raised Maya since the girl was 3, after Maya's mother disappeared into the night with a man nobody knew and never came back. Ruby had worked at the chicken processing plant for 40 years before her lungs gave out from the chemicals and cold. Now, she survived on a disability check that barely covered their rent, let alone the medicine she needed but couldn't afford. Maya walked to the tiny kitchen, no bigger than a closet, and opened the refrigerator. Half a carton of eggs, some butter, bread that would go stale tomorrow, and a jar of grape jelly. She pulled out 2 eggs and cracked them into the single frying pan they owned, watching them sizzle in the margarine. Dinner for 2. Again. The trailer park where they lived sat on the eastern edge of Harlan County, Kentucky, tucked into the hills where the coal mines used to run deep before they closed down and left the whole region gasping for air. Most of the trailers were rusted, sagging, or both. Some had been abandoned altogether, windows busted out, doors hanging crooked. The Carter trailer was one of the better ones, which wasn't saying much. The floor creaked, the bathroom sink hadn't worked in 2 years, and the heating only worked when it felt like it. But it was home, and Maya had learned a long time ago that home wasn't about walls or windows. It was about the person waiting for you when you walked through the door. She divided the eggs onto 2 chipped plates and carried one back to her grandmother, who sat propped up against 3 pillows, her breathing labored. "You didn't have to make me anything," Ruby said, though her hands reached for the plate anyway. "You gotta eat," Maya replied simply. They ate in silence, the rain still drumming overhead. When they finished, Maya collected the plates and washed them in the kitchen sink, scrubbing each one carefully, even though there were only 4 plates total in the whole trailer. Her grandmother had taught her that taking care of what you had was the only way to keep it. Later that night, after Ruby had fallen into a restless sleep, Maya sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes. Bills, past due notices, a letter from the trailer park manager saying they had 14 days to pay the $675 they owed or they'd be evicted. Maya had been working after school at Miller's Feed and Supply, sweeping floors and stocking shelves for $7 an hour. In 3 months, she'd saved $218, tucked away in an old coffee can under her bed. It wasn't nearly enough. She pressed her palms against her eyes and tried not to cry. Crying didn't fix anything. She'd learned that too. The storm outside grew worse as the night deepened. Wind howled through the gaps in the trailer's siding, and somewhere nearby, a tree branch cracked and fell. Maya crawled into the sleeping bag on the couch where she slept every night, her grandmother needing the only bed, and pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. She stared at the water-stained ceiling and wondered how long they could keep this up. How long before her grandmother's cough turned into something worse? How long before the eviction notice became real? She fell asleep to the sound of rain and her grandmother's ragged breathing. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world clean and bright under a cold October sun. Maya woke early, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big, and left a note for her grandmother before slipping outside. Saturdays meant extra hours at the feed store, and every dollar counted. She walked the 2 miles into town along the muddy shoulder of the highway, her sneakers soaked within minutes. Cars passed without slowing, their drivers barely glancing at the skinny girl trudging through the muck. Maya didn't mind. She'd walked this road so many times she could do it with her eyes closed. Miller's Feed and Supply sat on the corner of Main and Oak, a squat brick building that smelled like grain and motor oil. Jack Miller, the owner, was already inside when Maya arrived, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Maya," he said, not unkindly. "Got a big delivery coming in. Need you to help unload and stack." "Yes, sir," Maya said, tying on the apron he handed her. She worked for 6 hours straight, hauling 50-pound bags of chicken feed, organizing shelves, sweeping the warehouse floor until her arms ached and her back screamed. Jack paid her in cash at the end of her shift, $42, and she tucked it carefully into her front pocket. "You're working hard for that grandma of yours," Jack said, leaning against the counter. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, then reached into the register and pulled out an extra 20. "Don't tell anyone I did this, but you're a good kid. Take it." Maya's throat tightened. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." She walked home slower than usual, exhausted but grateful. The extra 20 meant they could buy medicine this week, maybe even some real groceries. As she walked, she let her mind wander, imagining a life where she didn't have to count every dollar, where her grandmother could see a real doctor, where they lived somewhere with heat that actually worked. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed it. The cottage. It sat back from the road, hidden behind a tangle of overgrown brush and half-dead trees. Maya had passed this spot 1,000 times, but she'd never really noticed the structure before. Maybe the storm had knocked down some of the foliage. Maybe the angle of the light was different. But there it was, unmistakable now. A small stone cottage covered in ivy, windows dark and empty. Maya stopped, staring. The cottage wasn't on their property exactly, but it was close, sitting on the far edge of the 5 acres that technically belonged to her grandmother, land that had been passed down through 3 generations, but never amounted to much more than weeds and rocks. Maya had heard stories about the old cottage from some of the older folks in town. They said it had been built back in the 1920s or 30s by some recluse who didn't trust banks or people. They said he'd died alone in there and that his ghost still walked the property at night. Maya didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in curiosity. She pushed through the brush, branches catching on her clothes, and approached the cottage slowly. Up close, it was bigger than it had looked from the road. The walls were made of stacked stone, fitted together so tightly you couldn't slide a knife between them. The roof was slate, still intact despite decades of weather. The windows were shuttered from the inside, and the heavy wooden door was closed tight. She tried the handle, locked, but as she stepped back, her boot hit something hard in the mud. She knelt down and brushed away the wet leaves and dirt. A metal ring, rusted but solid, attached to what looked like a cellar door set into the ground beside the cottage. Her heart began to beat faster. She pulled on the ring, but it wouldn't budge. The door was swollen from the rain, or maybe just age. She looked around, found a thick branch, and used it as a lever. On the 3rd try, the door groaned and shifted, then swung open with a screech of old hinges. A set of stone steps descended into darkness. Maya hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away, to leave whatever was down there alone. But another part of her, the part that had learned to fight for every scrap of hope, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was something down there worth finding. She pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and started down. The air below was cold and dry, untouched by the rain. The steps led into a small root cellar, its walls lined with empty shelves. Dust covered everything, thick as snow. But the strangest thing was how well preserved it all was. No rot, no collapse, just stillness, like the space had been waiting. Maya swept the light across the room and froze. In the far corner, almost hidden behind a support beam, was another door, smaller, made of iron, with a heavy lock that looked far newer than anything else in the cellar. She approached it slowly, her breath shallow. The lock was modern, maybe only 20 or 30 years old. Someone had been down here, recently. She tried the handle anyway, knowing it wouldn't open. It didn't. But as she stepped back, her foot caught on something and she stumbled. Her hand shot out to catch herself, landing hard against the stone wall. Something clicked. A section of the wall shifted inward, just an inch, revealing a seam she hadn't seen before. Maya's pulse hammered in her ears. She pushed harder, and the wall swung open like a door, smooth and silent, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. She should have left. She should have run back up those steps and never looked back. But Maya had spent her whole life being told what she couldn't have, what she couldn't do, what she couldn't hope for. And standing there in the cold darkness, staring into that secret passage, she made a choice. She stepped through. The passage was short, maybe 10 feet long, and opened into another chamber. This one was larger, and as Maya's flashlight swept across it, her breath caught in her throat. Wooden crates lined the walls, stacked carefully, labeled with faded handwriting. Metal boxes sat on reinforced shelves. And in the center of the room, on a wooden table, sat a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. Maya moved closer, her hands shaking. She opened the journal carefully, and on the first page, in neat script, were the words, "If you are reading this, then you have found what I could not take with me. May it serve you better than it served me, William." She flipped through the pages. Dates, entries, calculations. The journal detailed decades of careful saving, of a man who didn't trust the government or the banks, who had buried his wealth piece by piece in this hidden vault. The entries went back to 1947 and ended abruptly in 1976. Maya's fingers traced the words, her mind racing. If this was real, if even a fraction of what William described was still here, then everything could change. She could pay the rent, buy medicine, fix the trailer, maybe even get her grandmother into a real house with real heat. She turned to one of the wooden crates and carefully pried open the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were stacks of bills. Old bills, but American currency didn't expire. 50s and hundreds, bundled neatly, preserved perfectly in the dry air. Maya's legs went weak, and she sat down hard on the cold stone floor. This was real. This was actually real. She didn't know how long she sat there, staring at the money, at the crates, at the impossible gift that had somehow landed in her lap. But eventually, the cold seeped into her bones, and reality crept back in. She couldn't just take this, could she? What if someone came looking for it? What if it was illegal? What if she got her grandmother in trouble? She closed the crate carefully, picked up the journal, and made her way back through the passage, through the cellar, up the stone steps into the fading afternoon light. She closed the cellar door and covered it again with leaves and mud. Then she ran. She ran all the way back to the trailer, her lungs burning, the journal clutched tight against her chest. When she burst through the door, her grandmother looked up from the couch, startled. "Maya? What in the world?" Maya couldn't speak. She just held up the journal, her eyes wild. "I found something, Grandma. I found something, and I think it might save us." Ruby took the journal with shaking hands and opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the first page, then widened. She looked up at Maya, then back down at the book, then up again. "Where did you get this?" "The old cottage, the one on our property. There's a cellar and a hidden room, and Grandma, there's money. So much money." Ruby's face went pale. She set the journal down carefully on the coffee table and pressed her hands to her chest. "William," she whispered. Maya knelt in front of her. "You knew him?" Ruby nodded slowly, her eyes distant. "A long time ago, before you were born, before your mother was born. He was a strange man, kind but distant, kept to himself. People said he was crazy, that he buried gold in his yard like a pirate. I thought it was just talk." "It's not talk, Grandma. It's real. I saw it." Ruby looked at her granddaughter, this fierce, brave child who had been forced to grow up too fast, and something shifted in her expression. Not fear, but resolve. "Then we need to be smart about this," Ruby said quietly, "because people who find money like that, people come looking, and not always the kind of people you want finding you." Maya nodded. She understood. In a place like Harlan County, where everyone knew everyone and secrets spread like wildfire, this could be dangerous. But it could also be the answer to every prayer she'd whispered into the dark. That night, Maya lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. She thought about the cottage, the hidden room, the man named William who had trusted the earth more than he'd trusted people. She thought about her grandmother's warning, about the danger that came with sudden wealth. But mostly she thought about hope, real hope, the kind that didn't feel like a fantasy. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the trailer's thin walls. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, and in the darkness of the forgotten cottage, $260 million waited in silence, hidden beneath the ground like seeds waiting for spring. Maya closed her eyes and made a promise to herself. She would figure this out. She would be smart. She would protect her grandmother and protect their chance at a real future. Because sometimes life didn't give you what you deserved, but sometimes, just sometimes, it gave you what you needed right when you were about to give up. And Maya Carter was done giving up. The next morning was Sunday, and Maya woke before dawn with a plan forming in her mind. She made her grandmother breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast with the last of the jelly, and waited until Ruby was settled in her chair before speaking. "I want to go back," Maya said, "to the cottage. I need to understand what we're dealing with." Ruby studied her over the rim of her coffee mug. "Not alone, you don't." "Grandma, you can't walk that far. Your lungs—" "Then we'll drive," Ruby interrupted. "That old Buick out back still runs. Barely, but it runs." Maya blinked. She'd forgotten about the car. It had been sitting behind the trailer for 2 years, covered in a tarp, unused since Ruby's license expired. But if it still worked— 20 minutes later, they were both squeezed into the ancient Buick, its engine coughing and sputtering but eventually turning over. Ruby drove slowly, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, and they made their way down the muddy road to the cottage. In the daylight, the place looked even stranger. The stone walls seemed too perfect, too carefully built for something that was supposed to be abandoned. The shutters were solid, not rotted. The door, though locked, showed no signs of forced entry or decay. Maya led her grandmother around the side to the cellar door. Together they pried it open again, and Ruby peered down into the darkness. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. They descended carefully, Ruby leaning heavily on Maya's arm. When they reached the hidden passage and stepped into the vault, Ruby stopped and stared, her hand flying to her mouth. "He really did it," she breathed. "William really did it." Maya watched her grandmother move slowly around the room, touching the crates, running her fingers along the shelves. There was something in Ruby's expression that looked like grief mixed with wonder. "What happened to him?" Maya asked softly. "To William?" Ruby was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice distant. "He disappeared. 1976, spring. Just gone one day. Some people said he moved away. Others said something darker. They searched his cottage, but they never found anything. Eventually, the property just sat here forgotten. Nobody wanted to buy land with that kind of history." "But the land is ours now," Maya said. "Has been for years." Ruby nodded. "Your great-grandfather won it in a card game back in the 80s. Never did anything with it. Neither did your grandfather. We all just let it sit." Maya knelt beside one of the metal boxes and carefully opened it. Inside were gold coins, dozens of them, gleaming despite the years. "Grandma," she whispered, "this is enough to change everything." Ruby knelt beside her granddaughter, ignoring the pain in her knees. She put her arm around Maya's thin shoulders. "Baby girl, money this big, it comes with questions. We can't just start spending it without people wondering where a woman on disability and a 12-year-old child got their fortune. So what do we do?" Ruby thought for a moment, then reached for the journal Maya had brought back. She flipped through it slowly, reading William's words, his careful documentation of every dollar saved, every coin purchased, every decision made. "We get help," Ruby said finally. "Legal help. Someone who can tell us if this money is really ours to claim, and if it is, how to do it right." Maya nodded. It made sense. But who could they trust? In a small town where gossip traveled faster than truth, one wrong word could bring trouble down on them like a hammer. "There's a lawyer," Ruby said slowly. "In Lexington. Woman named Patricia. She helped me once, years ago, when your grandfather's will was contested. She's honest. Careful. She doesn't gossip." "Can we afford her?" Ruby smiled sadly. "I think we can afford just about anything now, baby. The question is whether we're brave enough to ask for help." They spent another hour in the vault, taking inventory as best they could without moving anything. The more they discovered, the more impossible it seemed. Besides the cash and gold coins, there were rare stamps in protective sleeves, vintage bonds, even a small collection of uncut gems wrapped in velvet. William hadn't just been saving. He'd been investing carefully and quietly in things that would hold their value across decades. When they finally emerged from the cellar, the sun was high and bright. Maya helped her grandmother back to the car, and they sat there for a moment, both of them trying to process what they'd seen. "Maya," Ruby said softly, "whatever happens next, we do it together, and we do it right. No shortcuts, no lies. We find out if this is legal, and if it is, we use it to help people, not just ourselves." Maya looked at her grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her, who had worked until her body broke, who had never once complained about the hand life had dealt her. "I promise," Maya said. They drove back to the trailer in silence, both of them carrying the weight of a secret that could either save them or destroy them. As they pulled up to their small plot of land, Maya noticed something that made her stomach drop. A black truck was parked outside their trailer, and leaning against it, arms crossed, was Dale Hutchins, the property manager who'd sent them the eviction notice. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Marcus Webb, a developer from Tennessee who'd been buying up land all over Harlan County, tearing down trailers and building condos nobody local could afford. Marcus wore expensive boots and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ruby parked the Buick, and she and Maya climbed out slowly. "Ruby," Dale said, tipping his head, "we need to talk." "About what?" Ruby's voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. Marcus stepped forward, still smiling. "About your property, Mrs. Carter, all of it. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer." Maya felt her grandmother's hand find hers and squeeze tight. "How generous?" Ruby asked. $20,000 for the trailer and the 5 acres. Cash. Today." It was more money than Ruby had seen in 10 years, but it was also a tiny fraction, of what was hidden in the cottage just a quarter-mile away. "I'll think about it," Ruby said carefully. Marcus's smile faded slightly. "I wouldn't think too long. Property values around here are dropping. This offer won't last forever." "I said I'll think about it." Marcus studied them both, his eyes lingering on Maya a beat too long. Then he nodded, handed Ruby a business card, and climbed back into his truck. Dale followed, and they drove away, leaving nothing but dust and unspoken threats hanging in the air. Ruby waited until they were out of sight before she spoke. "They know something," she said quietly. Maya felt cold despite the warm sun. "How could they?" "I don't know. But 20,000 for worthless land, that's not generosity. That's greed. Someone told them something's valuable out here." They went inside, and Ruby immediately picked up the phone. She dialed from memory, her fingers shaking slightly. "Patricia, it's Ruby Carter. I know it's been years, but I need your help. Something's happened, and I don't know who else to trust." Maya listened as her grandmother explained, carefully, cautiously, about the cottage and the vault and the journal. When she hung up, Ruby looked exhausted. "She'll be here Tuesday," Ruby said. "She's going to bring someone who specializes in estate law, someone who can tell us if William's money is legally ours." "And if it's not?" Ruby pulled Maya close. "Then we walk away. But something tells me William didn't hide all that just for it to rot in the ground. He wanted someone to find it. And for better or worse, that someone was you." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Marcus Webb's smile, about Dale Hutchins showing up out of nowhere, about the way people's eyes changed when they smelled money. She thought about William, alone in his cottage, trusting stone and earth more than people. Maybe he'd been right to hide it. Maybe some treasures were better left buried. But as she lay there in the dark, listening to her grandmother's labored breathing, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not when they were 14 days from eviction. Not when medicine cost more than food. Not when hope had finally, impossibly, shown up at their door. She fell asleep with her hand wrapped around the old coffee can under her bed, the one that held her $262 in carefully folded bills. Tomorrow, she'd add the $62 from yesterday's work. Every dollar mattered. But now, maybe they had a chance at something more than survival. Maybe they had a chance at a life. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets across the Kentucky hills. And in the hidden vault beneath the forgotten cottage, $260 million waited in the darkness, patient as stone for the moment when everything would change. Monday morning arrived grey and cold, the kind of October day that promised winter wasn't far behind. Maya woke early, her mind already racing with plans. Her grandmother was still asleep, her breathing rough but steady, and Maya moved quietly through the trailer, gathering supplies. She found an old toolbox under the kitchen sink, dusty and half empty. Inside were a hammer, a rusty screwdriver, a small pry bar, and a flashlight that worked if you smacked it hard enough. Not much, but it would have to do. She also grabbed a backpack, stuffing in a notebook, a pen, her phone charger, and a bottle of water. Before she left, she wrote a note for her grandmother. "Gone to the cottage. Be back by lunch. Don't worry. Love you." The walk to the cottage felt different this time. Now that she knew what waited there, every step carried weight. The morning mist clung to the ground, making the world feel muffled and secret. When she reached the overgrown path leading to the stone structure, she paused and looked back toward the road. No one was watching. No cars passed. Good. She pushed through the brush and approached the cottage with fresh eyes. Yesterday, she'd only explored the cellar and the vault beneath it, but today she wanted to see the cottage itself, to understand who William had been and why he'd built such an elaborate hiding place. The front door was still locked, solid oak with iron hinges that hadn't rusted despite decades of weather. Maya walked around the perimeter, testing the shuttered windows. They were latched from inside, sealed tight. She tried the back door, also locked. She stood there, hands on her hips, thinking. Then she remembered the cellar entrance. If William had built a hidden passage down there, maybe there was a way into the cottage from below. She lifted the cellar door again, propped it open with a stick, and descended the stone steps. The air was just as cold and dry as yesterday, undisturbed by time. She made her way to the iron door in the corner, the one with the modern lock, and studied it more carefully. The lock was a deadbolt, heavy duty, the kind you'd use to protect something valuable. She tried the handle again, knowing it wouldn't budge, but she had to try. Then she knelt down and examined the floor around the door. The stone was different here, cleaner, like someone had been down here recently, or at least more recently than the 1970s. Maya's pulse quickened. She stood and ran her hands along the wall near the iron door, pressing, feeling for anything unusual. Nothing. She tried the adjacent wall. Still nothing. Then she remembered how she'd found the first hidden passage by accident when she'd stumbled and caught herself against the wall. Maybe William had designed his secrets to be found by chance, or maybe by someone persistent enough to keep looking. She began working systematically, pressing every stone, every joint, every shadow. It took 20 minutes of patient searching before she felt it. A stone that gave slightly under pressure, sinking inward maybe half an inch. A soft click echoed through the cellar. Behind her, a section of the opposite wall shifted, swinging inward to reveal a narrow staircase leading upward. Maya's breath caught. She grabbed her flashlight and climbed the stairs carefully, each step solid beneath her feet. At the top was another door, this one unlocked. She pushed it open and found herself standing inside the cottage. The interior was nothing like she expected. Instead of decay and abandonment, she found a space frozen in time. The main room was small but well built, with a stone fireplace, a simple wooden table, and 2 chairs. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books whose spines she could barely read in the dim light filtering through the shuttered windows. But what struck her most was how clean everything was. No thick dust, no cobwebs, no signs of rodents or rot. The air was stale but not musty. It was as if someone had sealed the place and walked away yesterday instead of decades ago. Maya moved through the space slowly, taking in every detail. In the corner sat a narrow bed with a wool blanket folded neatly at its foot. Beside it, a small wooden chest. She opened it carefully and found clothes, men's clothes, plain work shirts and trousers, all preserved in the dry air. The kitchen area was even stranger. A hand pump sat over a small sink. Cabinets held tin plates, cups, basic cooking supplies. And when Maya opened the cabinet beneath the sink, she found something that made her stop cold. A trapdoor, built right into the floor. Her hands shook as she pulled it open. Below was darkness, but when she shined her flashlight down, she saw another set of steps, these ones leading deeper than the cellar, deeper than the vault she'd already discovered. This was it. This was the real entrance. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She should wait. She should get her grandmother. She should be smart about this. But her feet were already moving, carrying her down into the darkness. The steps were steep and narrow, carved directly into the stone. She counted as she descended. 10 steps, 20, 30, 40. She must be at least 20 feet underground now, maybe more. Finally, the steps ended at a landing. In front of her stood a heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron bands, and mounted on the wall beside it was something that didn't belong in a structure built in the 1920s, a keypad. Maya stared at it, her mind reeling. The keypad was old, not modern digital but mechanical, the kind with actual numbered buttons that clicked when pressed. Someone had installed this, maintained it, kept it working long after William supposedly disappeared. She tried the door handle anyway. Locked tight. She examined the keypad more closely. 9 buttons, numbered 0 through 9, worn smooth from use. No instructions, no hints. Just 9 numbers and a door that wouldn't open without the right combination. Maya pulled out her phone and took pictures, documenting everything. Then she sat down on the stone steps and thought. William had left the journal in the first vault, the smaller one. Maybe there were clues in his writing, hints about a combination he'd use. She climbed back up, through the cottage, down into the cellar, and into the vault where she'd found the journal. She picked it up and started reading more carefully this time, looking for patterns, for numbers that repeated. William's entries were methodical, almost obsessive. He documented every dollar he earned, every purchase he made, every coin he acquired. But scattered throughout were personal entries, thoughts, fears, moments of doubt. One entry from 1952 caught her eye. Today marks 18 years since I left that life behind. 18 years of peace. 18 years of building something they can never take from me. 18. Maya flipped forward, looking for more personal dates. Another entry from 1961. 27 years old when I made my choice. 27 years ago this week. Strange how time bends memory. 27. She kept reading, her excitement building. In 1968 he wrote, 42 years on this earth, 42 years of lessons learned the hard way. 42. Maya grabbed her notebook and started writing down numbers. 18, 27, 42. She looked for more, found references to other significant dates. His mother's death when he was 14. The year he bought the land, 1946. She studied the numbers, looking for patterns. Then she noticed something. In the very first entry, dated January 1st, 1947, William had written, New year, new life, the 9th of my new beginnings. 9. She flipped to the last entry, written in shaky handwriting on March 3rd, 1976. If this is my last entry, know that I have no regrets. 7 decades of life, 6 of them spent preparing for what comes next. One final secret to keep, 761. Maya felt something click in her mind. She gathered the journal and her notes and hurried back through the cottage, down the long staircase to the keypad. Her fingers hovered over the buttons. She tried the first combination that made sense, 1842, the year he'd been born, if she'd calculated correctly from his entries. Nothing happened. She tried another combination, 976, the numbers from his final entry. Still nothing. She took a breath and thought harder. William was methodical, careful. He wouldn't use something obvious. But he'd also left the journal where someone could find it. He wanted someone to figure this out eventually. She went back to the first entry. The 9th of my new beginnings. Then she remembered something else. In one entry from 1955, he'd mentioned building the vault 28 feet below the surface. 28. She tried 928. The keypad clicked. A heavy bolt slid back inside the door. Maya's hands shook as she pulled the handle. The door swung open, smooth and silent, revealing a chamber beyond that made the first vault look like a closet. She stepped inside and stopped breathing. The beam of her flashlight swept across a space the size of a small warehouse. The ceiling was vaulted, reinforced with wooden beams and steel supports, and everywhere were stacks of wealth that belonged in a museum or a bank vault, not buried beneath a Kentucky hillside. Metal shelving units lined the walls, floor to ceiling, each one loaded with wooden crates, metal boxes, and carefully labeled containers. In the center of the room sat a massive table covered in what looked like maps and documents protected by glass. Maya walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing off the stone walls. She approached the nearest shelf and opened one of the wooden crates. Inside were bundles of cash, wrapped in wax paper and sealed in plastic bags. She picked up one bundle and saw they were $100 bills, old but perfectly preserved. She counted quickly. 100 bills per bundle, $10,000 in her hand. She set it down carefully and moved to the next crate. More cash, the next one. Gold coins, dozens of them, each one in its own protective sleeve. The next. Silver bars, stamped with dates from the 1930s and 40s. Her legs felt weak. She leaned against the shelf for support and forced herself to breathe. This wasn't just savings. This was a fortune, a real, impossible fortune. She moved deeper into the vault, documenting everything with her phone camera, though her hands shook so badly some of the photos came out blurred. She found crates filled with rare stamps, their values listed in neat handwriting on index cards. She found boxes of uncut gemstones, diamonds and emeralds and sapphires that caught her flashlight and threw rainbow colors across the walls. She found artwork, small pieces, carefully wrapped and stored, with certificates of authenticity tucked inside protective sleeves. She found antique watches, rare coins from countries that didn't exist anymore, even a collection of historical documents that looked old enough to be Revolutionary War era. And at the far end of the vault, she found something that stopped her cold. A wall-mounted safe, enormous, built directly into the stone. And taped to its door was an envelope with one word written on it in William's handwriting. Truth. Maya's fingers trembled as she pulled the envelope free and opened it. Inside was a letter written on yellowed paper in the same careful script as the journal. To whoever finds this, it began. If you've made it this far, then you've proven yourself patient and clever enough to deserve the truth. My name is William Arthur Hayes, and I was born on January 18, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky. What you see before you represents 63 years of my life, from age 14 until my last day on this earth. I was not born wealthy. I was born poor, the son of a coal miner who died in a collapse when I was 9. I watched my mother work herself into an early grave trying to feed 5 children. I learned young that the world does not care about the poor, that banks cannot be trusted, that the government will take what little you have and call it taxes or fees or progress. When I was 14, my mother died. I was sent to live with an uncle who worked me like a mule and paid me nothing. I ran away at 16 and spent 2 years riding freight trains, working odd jobs, sleeping in fields and abandoned buildings. I learned to trust no one, to keep what I earned hidden, to never put my faith in institutions that could fail or betray. In 1962, I met a man in Tennessee who taught me how to invest in things that held their value. Gold, silver, art, rare items that the wealthy hoarded while the poor struggled. He taught me to be patient, to buy when prices fell, to never sell in desperation. He died in 1965 and left me his collection, worth maybe $40,000 at the time. I took that $40,000 and spent the next 40 years turning it into what you see here. I lived simply, spent almost nothing, invested carefully. I bought this land in 1966 and spent 10 years building this vault, this fortress, this monument to independence from a system I could never trust. I have no children, no family, no heirs. I never married, never had close friends. I chose solitude because it was safer than trust. But as I write this, knowing my time is short, I wonder if I made a mistake. If all this wealth, all this careful preservation means anything if it dies with me. So I am leaving this for you, stranger. Whoever you are, whatever brought you to this forgotten place, it is yours now, all of it. The money, the gold, the artifacts, every last penny. But I ask one thing in return. Use it wisely. Use it to build something good. Do not hoard it as I did. Do not let fear make you lonely. Give it life. Give it purpose. Make it mean something more than numbers in a vault. If you can do that, then perhaps my life was not wasted after all. Perhaps all those years of careful saving served a purpose I could never see. The combination to the safe is written in the journal, hidden in the entries from my final year. Inside, you will find the documentation needed to claim this legally, though I warn you, it will not be easy. Powerful people do not like it when the poor suddenly become rich. Be careful, be smart, be better than I was. William Arthur Hayes, March 3, 1976. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She sank to the floor and sat there in the darkness, surrounded by more wealth than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, holding a letter from a lonely man who'd spent 63 years preparing for a moment he'd never see. What happens next will turn this discovery upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the bravest hearts belong to the smallest hands. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Maya didn't know how long she sat there, crying for a man she'd never met, mourning the loneliness that poured from every word of his letter. Finally, she wiped her eyes, folded the letter carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. She had work to do. She returned to the journal, now reading the final year's entries with new purpose, looking for the combination to the safe. It didn't take long to find it. William had been clever, but not cruel. In his entry from December 25, 1975, he wrote, "No Christmas celebration for me, just another quiet day. 33 years since I built my first hiding place. 15 years since I finished this vault. 7 months until I expect my heart to give out, according to the doctor I saw in Lexington. The numbers of my life counted down. 33, 15, 7. Maya approached the safe and spun the dial. 33, 1507. The lock clicked. The handle turned. The heavy door swung open. Inside was a metal filing box, the kind lawyers used for important documents. Maya pulled it out and set it on the table. Inside were papers, dozens of them, all carefully organized in labeled folders. The first folder was marked Documentation. Inside were bills of sale, certificates of authenticity, appraisals, receipts. Every single item in the vault had been documented, dated, proven legitimate. William had kept records of everything. The second folder was marked Legal. Inside was a handwritten will, notarized and dated March 2, 1976, one day before his final journal entry. Maya's hands shook as she read it. I, William Arthur Hayes, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath my entire estate to whoever legally claims ownership of the property located at 1247 Hickory Ridge Road, Harlan County, Kentucky. Should that person prove worthy of this inheritance by demonstrating the patience and intelligence to locate this vault and open it, Then all contents herein shall become their legal property, free and clear. The will went on for 3 pages, covering every possible legal angle, anticipating challenges, establishing proof of ownership. William had even included contact information for a law firm in Louisville, presumably the one that had helped him draft the document. Maya sat back, her mind spinning. This was real, legally, documentably real. If her grandmother truly owned the property, and if Maya had been the one to find and open the vault, then according to William's will, this entire fortune belonged to them. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. 9:47 in the morning. She'd been down here for over 3 hours. Her grandmother would be worried. Maya carefully returned everything to the filing box, closed the safe, and made her way back through the vault, through the cottage, up to the surface. The morning sun had burned off the mist, and the day was bright and clear. She stood outside the cottage, breathing fresh air, trying to process what she'd just discovered. $260 million. Maybe more. Enough to change not just her life and her grandmother's life, but the lives of everyone in their town, everyone in their county, maybe everyone in the entire region. The weight of it pressed down on her like a physical force. She was 12 years old. She cleaned floors at a feed store for $7 an hour. She wore clothes from the donation bin at church. She ate scrambled eggs for dinner because that's all they could afford. And now she was standing on top of a fortune that could buy entire cities. The absurdity of it made her laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed through the empty woods. Then she clamped her hand over her mouth, suddenly terrified that someone might hear, might come investigating. She needed to get back to her grandmother. They needed to call that lawyer, Patricia, and figure out what to do next. But more than that, she needed to tell someone, needed to share this impossible burden before it crushed her. She was halfway back to the trailer when she saw the truck. It was parked in front of their home, the same black truck from yesterday, Marcus Webb's truck. And standing on their small porch, talking to her grandmother through the screen door, was Marcus himself. Maya's blood ran cold. She quickened her pace, clutching her backpack tight. As she approached, Marcus turned and saw her. That smile spread across his face again, the one that didn't reach his eyes. "There's the young lady," he said. "Out exploring?" "Just walking," Maya said carefully, moving to stand beside her grandmother. Ruby's face was tight with worry, but she kept her voice steady. "Marcus was just leaving. Weren't you, Marcus?" "Actually, I was hoping we could continue our conversation," Marcus said, "about my offer for your property. I've been thinking and I'm prepared to go higher. 25,000, cash, today." Maya felt her grandmother's hand find hers and squeeze. "That's generous," Ruby said slowly, "but like I said yesterday, I need time to think." Marcus's smile faded. "Mrs. Carter, I'm trying to help you here. This trailer park's going under. Half the lots are empty. The owner's selling out to developers. You'll be evicted in 2 weeks regardless. Take my offer while it's still on the table." "2 weeks is still 2 weeks," Ruby replied. "I'll have my answer for you by then." Marcus studied them both, his eyes calculating. Then he pulled out a business card and set it on the porch railing. "Don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often." He climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Ruby didn't speak until the truck disappeared from sight. Then she pulled Maya inside and locked the door behind them. "What did you find?" she asked. Maya dropped her backpack on the couch and pulled out her phone. "Everything, Grandma. We found everything." She showed her grandmother the photos one after another. The vault, the shelves, the crates of money, the gold, the safe, the letter from William, the will. Ruby sank into her chair, one hand pressed to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "Lord have mercy on us all." Maya knelt in front of her. "The will says it's ours, Grandma, legally ours. William wanted whoever owned the property to have it." "And Marcus Webb?" "He doesn't know. He can't know. Not yet." Ruby nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "Patricia's coming tomorrow. We show her everything. We do this by the book. No shortcuts, no risks." That night, Maya lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Her mind wouldn't stop racing, cycling through images of the vault, William's letter, Marcus Webb's predatory smile, her grandmother's tears. She thought about what William had written, about not hoarding wealth like he did, about using it for something good. She thought about all the people in their trailer park facing eviction, all the families struggling like they had been, all the children going to bed hungry because there wasn't enough money for both food and heat. She thought about her grandmother's medical bills, the ones they couldn't pay, the treatments they couldn't afford. She thought about the high school she'd attend in a few years, the college she'd never dreamed of reaching because college wasn't for people like her. But now it could be. Now everything could be different. The question was, how? How did a 12-year-old girl and her elderly grandmother navigate a fortune that could make them targets? How did they protect themselves from people like Marcus Webb, who would do anything to get what they wanted? How did they honor William's wish to use the money wisely, to build something good? Maya didn't have answers, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't let this fortune turn them into something ugly. She wouldn't let greed or fear make her into the kind of person who hoarded wealth while others suffered. William had spent 63 years alone, building a fortress against a world he couldn't trust. Maya didn't want that life. She wanted something better, something William himself had wished for in his final letter. She wanted to build something good. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the trailer's thin walls. Somewhere in the darkness, the forgotten cottage sat silent, guarding its secrets. And deep beneath the Kentucky soil, $260 million waited patiently, ready to change lives, ready to build futures, ready to prove that sometimes the smallest hands could carry the biggest hope. Maya closed her eyes and whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'll do right by you, William. I swear I will." And in that moment, she meant it with every fiber of her being. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the lawyers would come, and the real work would begin. Tomorrow, a 12-year-old girl and her grandmother would step into a world they'd never imagined, carrying the weight of a lonely man's final wish. But tonight, just for tonight, Maya let herself dream of what good they could do, what lives they could change, what legacy they could build from the ashes of William's solitary life. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she fell asleep smiling. Tuesday morning arrived with a knock on the trailer door that made both Maya and Ruby jump. It was exactly 9 o'clock, and through the window they could see a silver sedan parked beside their old Buick. Ruby opened the door to reveal a woman in her mid-50s, dressed professionally but not flashily, carrying a leather briefcase. Her grey hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes were kind but sharp. "Ruby," she said warmly, reaching out to embrace Maya's grandmother. "It's been too long." "Patricia," Ruby replied, relief flooding her voice. "Thank you for coming." Patricia Chen stepped inside, and her eyes immediately found Maya. "And this must be the young lady who made the discovery." Maya nodded, suddenly shy despite everything she'd been through in the past few days. Patricia set her briefcase on the kitchen table and pulled out a legal pad and pen. "Before we go any further, I need to establish attorney-client privilege. Everything you tell me today is confidential. I cannot and will not share it with anyone without your permission. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Ruby said. "Good. Now, Ruby told me on the phone that you found something on your property. Something significant. I need you to tell me everything from the beginning, and I need complete honesty. If we're going to do this right, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Maya and Ruby spent the next hour telling the story. Maya described finding the cottage, the cellar, the hidden passages, the vault. She showed Patricia the photos on her phone, the journal, William's letter, the will. She explained about the keypad, the combination, the safe, the documentation. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat shorthand. When they finished, she sat back and let out a long, slow breath. "This is extraordinary," she said quietly, "and potentially very complicated." "Is it legal?" Maya asked, her voice small. "Can we actually claim it?" Patricia flipped through the photos again, studying the will carefully. Based on what you've shown me, yes. William Hayes created a valid will, properly notarized, with clear instructions. If your grandmother legally owns the property at 1247 Hickory Ridge Road, and if you were the one to discover and access the vault according to the terms he set, then legally, this inheritance is yours. Maya felt her grandmother's hand squeeze hers tight. But, Patricia continued, there are complications. First, we need to verify the chain of ownership for the property. Second, we need to authenticate all the documentation William left. Third, and most importantly, we need to establish the legitimacy of the wealth itself. What do you mean? Ruby asked. We need to prove the money wasn't stolen, wasn't the proceeds of criminal activity, wasn't obtained through fraud or tax evasion. If we can't prove it's clean, the government could seize everything. Maya's stomach dropped. How do we prove that? We examine William's records. Every receipt, every bill of sale, every transaction he documented. We trace it back and show that he acquired this wealth legally over decades of careful saving and investing. Patricia looked at them both seriously. This will take time, weeks, possibly months, and during that time you cannot touch any of it, not a single dollar. We understand, Ruby said, though Maya could hear the disappointment in her voice. They still had 11 days before eviction. Patricia seemed to read their thoughts. How bad is your immediate situation? Ruby pulled out the eviction notice and handed it over. Patricia read it, her expression darkening. Dale Hutchins, she muttered. That man's been running this park like his personal kingdom for years. She looked up. I can buy you time. I'll file a motion contesting the eviction on procedural grounds. It won't stop it permanently, but it'll delay things by at least 60 days. 60 days? Maya breathed. That was enough time. That was more than enough time. But, Patricia said firmly, I need something from both of you in return. Total secrecy. You cannot tell anyone about this discovery. Not friends, not neighbors, not anyone. The moment word gets out, you'll be descended upon by treasure hunters, scam artists, distant relatives you never knew existed, and lawyers far less ethical than me. What about Marcus Webb? Maya asked. Patricia's head snapped up. Marcus Webb knows about this. No, Ruby said quickly, but he's been pressuring us to sell the property. Offered $25,000 yesterday, which is way more than this land's worth normally. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Did he say why he wants it? Just that he's buying up parcels for development. Marcus Webb doesn't develop property, Patricia said grimly. He flips it, which means someone told him something valuable is on your land, and he's trying to buy it cheap before you figure out what it is. Maya and Ruby exchanged worried glances. We need to move carefully, Patricia continued. I'm going to need access to the vault to document everything properly, but we need to do it quietly, without drawing attention. When? Maya asked. Tomorrow, early morning, before anyone's awake. Patricia began packing her briefcase. In the meantime, I'm going to do some research on William Hayes, see what I can find out about his background, and I'm going to make some calls to a colleague who specializes in estate law. We're going to need expert help on this. After Patricia left, promising to return at 5 o'clock the next morning, Maya and her grandmother sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Ruby spoke. I need to tell you something, baby, about William. Maya turned to look at her grandmother, surprised by the heaviness in her voice. I knew him, Ruby said softly. Not well, but I knew him. And he wasn't always the lonely man you read about in that journal. She stood slowly and walked to a small closet in the hallway. From the top shelf, she pulled down a shoebox filled with old photographs. She brought it back to the couch and began sorting through the pictures, her weathered fingers gentle on the fragile paper. Here, she said, pulling out a black and white photo and handing it to Maya. The photograph showed a young woman, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a man in his early 30s. They were in front of the cottage, back when it looked new and well-maintained. The woman was smiling, bright and hopeful. The man looked serious, but not unkind. Maya stared at the young woman's face, then looked up at her grandmother in shock. This is you? Ruby nodded. 1968. I was 21 years old, just married to your grandfather. We'd moved into a trailer about 3 miles from here, and I'd heard about the strange man who lived alone in the stone cottage. People in town said he was crazy, dangerous, that he'd shoot anyone who came near his property. She paused, lost in memory. But I didn't believe gossip. Never did. One day, our well pump broke, and we didn't have money to fix it. Your grandfather was working double shifts at the mine, and I was home alone, pregnant with your mother. I knew there was a hand pump at the cottage, and I was desperate. Maya leaned forward, captivated. I walked there, scared out of my mind, and knocked on his door. William answered with a rifle in his hand, but when he saw it was just a pregnant girl asking for water, he lowered it. He let me use his pump, filled 4 jugs for me without saying more than 10 words. Ruby smiled at the memory. I came back the next day to thank him, brought him a pie I'd baked. He was surprised, I think. Said nobody had ever brought him anything before. We talked for a while, just small talk, and I realized he wasn't dangerous, just lonely, just scared. What was he scared of? Maya asked. People, Ruby said simply. He told me once that he'd grown up poor, watching his family get taken advantage of by banks, by landlords, by the system. He said he'd decided young that the only person he could trust was himself, and the only security worth having was what you could hide where no one else could find it. She pulled out another photo, this one showing William working in a garden beside the cottage. He was kind in his way. That summer, when I was too pregnant to walk far, he'd bring me vegetables from his garden. When your mother was born, he carved her a little wooden rattle. I still have it somewhere. So what happened? Maya asked. Why did he disappear? Ruby's expression darkened. Spring of 1976. There were rumors going around town about William having money. I don't know who started them or how they started, but suddenly people were talking about buried treasure, about a crazy hermit sitting on a fortune. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. Men started showing up at his cottage. Some just wanted to look around. Others were more aggressive, demanding he let them search his property. William ran them off, but it shook him. He came to see me one night late and he looked scared, really scared. What did he say? Maya whispered. He said people were getting dangerous, that someone had broken into his cottage while he was out, torn the place apart looking for valuables. He said he couldn't trust anyone anymore, that he was going to disappear for a while until things calmed down. Ruby wiped at her eyes. I never saw him again. A few weeks later, the sheriff went to check on him, found the cottage empty, no signs of struggle, just gone. They searched for a while, but eventually gave up. Most people figured he'd run off, maybe to start over somewhere else. Some thought he'd been killed and his body hidden. But you don't think that, Maya said. Ruby shook her head slowly. I think he went down into that vault you found and never came back up. I think his heart gave out, just like he predicted in his journal, and he died down there alone, surrounded by all that wealth he'd spent his life protecting. The thought made Maya's chest ache. Why didn't you look for him? If you knew about the cottage. Baby, I didn't know about the vault. Nobody did. William never told me about it, never hinted. And after he disappeared, the property just sat there. Nobody wanted to buy land with that kind of history. Eventually it got sold for back taxes, and your great-grandfather won it in a card game from whoever'd bought it at auction. Ruby took both of Maya's hands in hers. William was a good man who let fear turn him into a ghost. He spent his whole life building walls to keep people out, and in the end, those walls became his prison. I don't want that for us, Maya. I don't want this money to make us into something we're not. Maya nodded, understanding. That's why we have to use it right, the way William wanted. Exactly. That night, Maya couldn't sleep again. She kept thinking about William, alone in his cottage, hearing people at his door demanding access to wealth he'd earned through decades of careful work. She thought about him sealing himself in the vault, his heart failing, dying surrounded by money that couldn't save him. She thought about Marcus Webb's smile and Dale Hutchins' threats, and all the people who would come crawling out of the woodwork once they knew what had been found. Around midnight, she heard a sound outside that made her freeze. A car engine, running low and quiet, idling on the road in front of their trailer. She crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. A dark sedan sat there, headlights off, just waiting. Maya's heart hammered. She watched for 10 minutes, barely breathing, before the car finally pulled away, slow and deliberate. Someone was watching them. The next morning at 5 o'clock sharp, Patricia arrived with another woman, older, dressed in what looked like hiking clothes. "This is Dr. Eleanor Price," Patricia said quietly. "She's an expert in authentication and historical documentation. She's going to help us verify everything in the vault." They drove to the cottage in Patricia's car, Maya giving directions. When they arrived, the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. Maya led them inside, through the hidden entrance, down the long staircase to the keypad. She entered the combination, and the heavy door swung open. Dr. Price stepped into the vault and stopped, her mouth falling open. "Oh my God," she breathed. For the next 6 hours, they worked methodically. Dr. Price examined documents, checked serial numbers on bills, verified certificates of authenticity. Patricia photographed everything, took detailed notes, created an inventory. Maya helped where she could, but mostly she watched, learning. She saw how carefully Dr. Price handled each item, how she cross-referenced dates and details, how she built a case for legitimacy piece by piece. Around noon, Dr. Price sat back from a stack of ledgers she'd been examining and looked at Patricia with wonder in her eyes. "It's clean," she said. "Every dollar, every coin, every acquisition. William Hayes kept immaculate records. He documented every source of income, every investment, every transaction. This isn't stolen wealth or hidden crime money. This is the result of 63 years of the most disciplined saving and investing I've ever seen." Patricia let out a breath she'd been holding. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. In fact, this might be one of the most thoroughly documented private collections I've ever encountered. William was obsessive about proving legitimacy. It's like he knew someday he'd need to justify every penny." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. William had been preparing for this moment, for the day when someone would question his wealth, and he'd made sure they'd have every answer they needed. "How much?" Patricia asked. "Total value?" Dr. Price consulted her notes. "Conservatively, based on current market values, I'd estimate 260 million, possibly more if some of these rare items are auctioned properly." The number hung in the air, impossible and real. They worked for another 3 hours, finishing the documentation. When they finally emerged from the vault, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "What happens now?" Maya asked as they drove back to the trailer. "Now we file the proper paperwork," Patricia said. "We register William's will with the probate court, establish the chain of property ownership, and begin the process of legally transferring the assets to your grandmother as the heir. It'll take time, but with Dr. Price's authentication and William's documentation, I don't anticipate major challenges." "How long?" Ruby asked from the back seat. 60 to 90 days, most likely. Maybe longer if someone contests the will, but I doubt they will. William made his intentions very clear. They pulled up to the trailer, and Maya immediately noticed something wrong. The front door was ajar. "We locked it," she said, her voice tight. "I know we locked it." Patricia put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Stay in the car. I'm calling the sheriff." But Maya was already out, running toward the trailer. Ruby called after her, but she didn't stop. She burst through the door and froze. The trailer had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, cushions thrown aside, closets emptied. Someone had torn through their home looking for something. Ruby came in behind her, gasping. "Oh no, oh no!" Patricia appeared with her phone to her ear. "Sheriff's on the way." She surveyed the damage, her expression grim. "They were looking for proof, evidence of what you found." "Did they find anything?" Ruby asked, her voice shaking. Maya quickly checked her hiding spots. The coffee can under her bed, still there. The journal she'd hidden in the bathroom ceiling panel, still there. Her phone with all the photos in her pocket. "No," she said, "nothing important." But the message was clear. Someone knew. Someone was watching. and someone was willing to break the law to get what they wanted. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. Deputy Tom Morrison, a tired-looking man in his 40s who'd been responding to break-ins in the trailer park for 20 years. He took their statement, looked around half-heartedly, and told them it was probably just local kids looking for drug money. But Maya saw the way Patricia's jaw tightened, saw the glance she exchanged with Ruby. They all knew this wasn't random. After the deputy left, Patricia pulled them aside. "We need to move faster than I thought, and you two need to be somewhere safer." "We can't leave," Ruby protested. "If we abandon the property, we could forfeit." "I'm not suggesting you leave permanently, but for the next few weeks, while we process everything, I think you should stay somewhere else, somewhere Marcus Webb and whoever's working with him can't find you." "I have a cabin," Dr. Price offered quietly. "Up in the hills near Cumberland Gap. Nobody knows about it. You'd be safe there." Ruby looked at Maya. "What do you think, baby?" Maya thought about the car idling outside last night, about their home torn apart, about the threats that would only get worse as word spread. She thought about her grandmother's weak lungs and the medicine she needed and how vulnerable they were in this rusted trailer. "I think we should go," she said quietly. They packed quickly, taking only essentials. Patricia promised to handle the eviction delay and the probate filing. Dr. Price would guide them to the cabin and make sure they had supplies. As they loaded the old Buick, Maya took one last look at the trailer park, at the only home she'd ever known. Then she looked toward the woods, toward the cottage hidden in the trees, toward the vault holding $260 million and one lonely man's final wish. "We'll make this right, William," she whispered. "I promise." The drive to Cumberland Gap took 3 hours through winding mountain roads. Dr. Price led the way in her SUV, and Ruby followed in the Buick, which coughed and sputtered, but kept going. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by dense forest. It was small but sturdy, with a wood stove, a generator, and enough provisions to last weeks if needed. "No one knows about this place except me and my late husband," Dr. Price said as she helped them unload. "You'll be safe here." That night, Maya and her grandmother sat on the cabin's porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The air was clean and cold, and for the first time in days, Maya felt like she could breathe. "Grandma," she said softly, "are we doing the right thing?" Ruby was quiet for a long moment. "I've been poor my whole life, baby, and I've watched poverty break people, turn them mean or desperate or hopeless. This money, it's a chance to break that cycle. Not just for us, but for everyone William wanted to help with it. But people are already coming after us. It's only going to get worse." "Maybe," Ruby acknowledged, "but I'd rather face threats as someone fighting for something good than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been." She pulled Maya close. "We're not keeping this secret forever. Once the legal process is done, once the money is rightfully ours, we're going to use it the way William wanted, openly, honestly, to build something that lasts." Maya nodded against her grandmother's shoulder. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I mess this up?" "Baby girl, you found a vault that had been hidden for 50 years. You solved puzzles William left for someone clever enough to understand. You've kept your head when most adults would have lost theirs." Ruby kissed the top of her head. "You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone. We're in this together." Over the next week, they settled into a quiet routine at the cabin. Patricia called every day with updates. The probate process was moving forward. The authentication was complete. No one had contested the will yet, though she warned them to expect challenges soon. Marcus Webb had filed a complaint about the Carters abandoning their trailer, but Patricia shut it down by proving they'd left forwarding information and were still technically residing on property they owned. Dr. Price visited twice, bringing groceries and news. Word was spreading in Harlan County about some kind of discovery on the old Hayes property. People were speculating, but nobody knew the truth yet. "How long until it becomes public record?" Maya asked during one visit. "The will filing is public, but the full inventory won't be until the probate is complete, maybe 6 more weeks." 6 weeks of hiding, 6 weeks of waiting, 6 weeks of living in fear that everything could still fall apart. But they also used the time to plan. Maya and Ruby spent hours talking about what they'd do with the money once it was theirs. A real house, yes. Medical care for Ruby, absolutely. College savings for Maya, without question. But beyond that, they dreamed bigger. A community center in Harlan County where people could learn trades, get help with job applications, access resources, scholarship funds for kids like Maya who never thought college was possible, medical assistance for families who couldn't afford treatment, housing support for people facing eviction. They'd use William's lonely fortune to bring people together, to build the community he'd been too scared to be part of. Maya filled notebooks with ideas, sketching out plans, calculating costs. She researched non-profits and foundations, learning how wealth could be structured to do the most good. And every night, she read from William's journal, learning from his discipline, his planning, his careful attention to detail. But she also learned from his mistakes, from the fear that had isolated him, from the walls that had turned his security into a prison. She wouldn't make those mistakes. She would be smarter, braver, better. On the 14th night at the cabin, Patricia called with news that changed everything. "Someone's contested the will," she said, her voice tight. Marcus Webb filed a claim saying the Hayes property was sold to him in a verbal agreement before William died, and therefore any assets found on it belonged to him. Maya's blood ran cold. Can he do that? He can try. But verbal agreements from 50 years ago are nearly impossible to prove, especially when the other party is dead. This is a stalling tactic, nothing more. So what happens? We fight it. I've already filed our response. We have documentation, authentication, a legal will. He has nothing but words, but it means the process will take longer, maybe another 60 days. After she hung up, Maya sat on the cabin floor, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. 4 more months of waiting. 4 more months of hiding. 4 more months of people like Marcus Webb trying to steal what didn't belong to them. Ruby knelt beside her. "We can walk away, baby. We can let it all go back to our old life. Nobody would blame you." Maya thought about it, really thought about it. Going back to the trailer, to $7 an hour at the feed store, to scrambled eggs for dinner and medicine they couldn't afford. Going back to watching her grandmother's health fail because they couldn't pay for treatment. Going back to a life that was slowly, quietly crushing them both. Then she thought about William, spending 63 years alone, building something that could change lives if only someone was brave enough to claim it. She thought about all the families facing eviction, all the kids working jobs after school like her, all the people who'd given up hope because hope felt too expensive. She looked up at her grandmother, and her voice was steady when she spoke. "No, we're not walking away. We're going to fight, and we're going to win. Because William trusted us with this, and we're not going to let fear or greed or Marcus Webb take that away." Ruby smiled through tears. That's my girl. The next morning, Maya woke with renewed purpose. She called Patricia and told her to fight the challenge with everything she had. She asked Dr. Price for books on estate law, on financial management, on non-profit structures. If she was going to be the guardian of William's legacy, she needed to understand it completely. She was 12 years old, yes, but she was also the girl who'd found what nobody else could find, who'd solved what nobody else could solve. She would learn. She would grow. She would become worthy of the trust William had placed in her. And when the day finally came that the money was legally theirs, she would be ready to use it the way he'd wanted, to build something good, something lasting, something that proved wealth meant nothing if you didn't share it. Outside the cabin, dawn broke over the Cumberland Hills, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. And in that light, a small girl with impossible dreams began to plan the future she'd never dared imagine, carrying the weight of a lonely man's hope and turning it into something that could change the world. The legal battle stretched through winter into early spring. Patricia filed motion after motion, buried Marcus Webb in paperwork, forced him to produce evidence he didn't have. Meanwhile, Maya and Ruby stayed at the cabin. living in a kind of suspended reality where they were both desperately poor and potentially wealthy beyond imagination. Maya turned 13 in February. Her grandmother made her a cake from a box mix on the cabin's wood stove, and Dr. Price brought a small present, a leather-bound notebook for Maya's planning. They celebrated quietly, just the three of them, and Maya blew out her candles wishing for only one thing: resolution. 2 weeks later, it came. Patricia drove up to the cabin with a smile wider than Maya had ever seen. She burst through the door waving a stack of papers. "He withdrew the challenge," she announced. "Marcus Webb dropped his claim this morning." Maya and Ruby grabbed each other, hardly daring to believe it. "What happened?" Ruby asked. Patricia's smile turned sharp. "I did some digging into Marcus's business dealings. Turns out he's been involved in some questionable land transactions over the years, pressuring elderly landowners to sell below value, forging signatures on contracts. I had a conversation with him yesterday and mentioned that if his challenge went to court, all of his business practices would become part of the public record." "You blackmailed him," Maya breathed. "I reminded him that glass houses and stones don't mix well," Patricia corrected. "He made the wise choice to walk away." "So what now?" Ruby asked, her voice shaking. "Now we finish the probate process, another 3 weeks, maybe 4, for the final paperwork, and then," Patricia looked at them both seriously, "the fortune is legally yours, all $263 million of it." The number still didn't feel real. It was too big, too impossible, too far removed from the life Maya had always known. "There's something else," Patricia continued, pulling a document from her briefcase. "While doing the final authentication, Dr. Price found something hidden in the back of one of William's ledgers, a letter addressed to you, Maya." Maya's heart stuttered. "To me? But he didn't know I existed. Not to you specifically, to the finder, but it feels personal nonetheless." Patricia handed her an envelope, yellowed with age but sealed tight. Maya's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter in William's familiar handwriting, but the tone was different from his other writings, more personal, more vulnerable. "To the one who found my life's work," it began. "I have been thinking about you, whoever you are, for many years now. In my loneliness, I have imagined you countless times. Sometimes I picture you as a struggling family, much like mine was when I was young. Sometimes I see you as a single person, fighting against a world that seems designed to keep the poor poor and the rich rich. Whoever you are, I want you to know something. This wealth does not belong to you because you deserve it or because you earned it. It belongs to you because you had the courage to look beneath the surface, to search for something hidden, to believe that there might be more to this world than what appears on the outside. That courage is rare. Most people walk past opportunities every day because they're too afraid to dig deeper, too convinced that good fortune only happens to other people, too beaten down by life to hope for something better. But you hoped, you searched, you found. Now comes the harder part, deciding what kind of person this wealth will make you. I spent 63 years building this fortune, and I spent those same 63 years alone. I told myself I was being careful, being smart, protecting what was mine. But the truth is, I was afraid that if I let people in, they would take advantage of me. Afraid that if I trusted anyone, they would betray that trust. Afraid that the world was fundamentally cruel and the only safety was in isolation. I was wrong. The cruelest thing in the world is not poverty or loss or even death. It is loneliness. It is the slow realization that you have built walls so high that no one can reach you anymore, even if they wanted to. Do not make my mistake. Use this wealth, yes, enjoy it absolutely. Buy security for yourself and your family, but do not hoard it the way I did. Do not let it isolate you. Do not let fear of loss prevent you from building something beautiful. Give it away. Share it. Use it to bring people together instead of pushing them apart. Build community where I built walls. Create connection where I created distance. If you can do that, then perhaps my lonely life will have meant something after all. Perhaps all those years of careful saving will become the foundation for something I never had the courage to build myself, a legacy of generosity instead of fear. I am leaving you more than money. I am leaving you a choice. You can follow my path of isolation and security, or you can choose a different way, a braver way. I hope you choose bravely. I wish I had. With hope for your future. William Arthur Hayes. Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. By the 3rd reading, her grandmother was crying too, and even Patricia had to wipe her eyes. He knew, Maya whispered. He knew what it felt like to be alone, and he didn't want that for us. Ruby pulled her close. Then we honor his wish, baby. We choose the brave way. The final 3 weeks of waiting were excruciating. Maya and Ruby spent the time making detailed plans with Patricia's help. They would establish a foundation in William's name. They would create programs that addressed the specific needs of Harlan County: housing assistance, medical care, education, job training. But they would also keep enough for themselves to live comfortably, to ensure Ruby's medical care, to give Maya opportunities she'd never dreamed of. You can't help others from a place of desperation, Patricia counseled. You need to be stable first, secure first, then you can build from a position of strength. It was wise advice, and they took it. Finally, on March 23rd, Patricia called with the words they'd been waiting 4 months to hear. It's official. The probate is complete. The assets are yours. They drove back to Harlan County the next day, their old Buick coughing all the way down the mountain. When they pulled up to the trailer park, Maya expected to feel relief, joy, triumph. Instead, she felt determined. Their trailer still sat on its plot, weathered and small. Dale Hutchins had rented it to someone else after they left, but Patricia had already handled that, compensating the new tenants and reclaiming the property. But Maya didn't want to stay there, not anymore. We need to go to the cottage, she told her grandmother. They drove there in silence, parking on the overgrown road. As they approached, Maya saw that someone had been there recently. Fresh tire tracks in the mud, broken branches near the cellar entrance. Her stomach tightened. They moved cautiously to the cottage and found the front door ajar. Inside, Marcus Webb sat at William's table, a smug expression on his face. Well, he said, standing slowly, if it isn't the lucky little orphan and her grandma. We're not orphans, Maya said quietly, and we're not lucky. We're legal owners of this property and everything in it. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. See, that's where you're wrong. I've been doing some research. This property has some zoning issues, some tax complications. I've filed a complaint with the county that could tie everything up for years. Patricia stepped through the door behind them, her phone in her hand. You were saying, Marcus? His face went pale. You're recording this? Just documenting a trespassing incident, Patricia said calmly. Maya, Ruby, this man is on your property without permission. Would you like me to call the sheriff? Marcus's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and moved toward the door. But as he passed Maya, he stopped. You think you've won, he said quietly. But money like that, it brings out the worst in people. You'll see. Everyone you know will come asking for a piece. Friends, family, strangers. They'll bleed you dry, and then you'll end up just like William, alone and broken. Maya met his eyes steadily. The difference is, we're not afraid of people. We're not building walls. We're building bridges. Something flickered in Marcus's expression, something like recognition or maybe respect. Then it was gone, and he walked out without another word. They watched his truck disappear down the road, and Ruby let out a shaky breath. He's right about one thing, she said quietly. People will come asking. Let them, Maya replied. We'll be ready. The first person who came asking was Dale Hutchins. He showed up at the cottage 3 days later, hat literally in hand, looking sheepish. Ruby, he said, I heard about your good fortune. I wanted to apologize for the eviction notice. I was just doing my job, you understand. Ruby studied him for a long moment. Your job is managing a trailer park, Dale, not throwing families out on the street for being 2 weeks late on rent. I know, and I'm real sorry about that. He shifted his weight. I was wondering, now that you've come into some money, if you might be interested in buying the whole park. Owners looking to sell, and I thought maybe you'd want to keep people from getting pushed out." Maya and Ruby exchanged glances. They'd already discussed this possibility. "We'll consider it," Ruby said, "but on one condition. If we buy it, you're fired. We'll find a manager who treats tenants like people, not ATM machines." Dale's face flushed red, but he nodded and left without arguing. The second person was Sheriff Morrison. He came officially, in his uniform, but his eyes were kind. "Miss Ruby, Miss Maya," he said, "I'm here on behalf of the county. There's been some talk about a significant discovery on your property, and the county wants to ensure everything's been properly reported for tax purposes." Patricia, who was now practically living at the cottage helping them organize everything, stepped forward with a folder full of documents. "Everything's been reported, Sheriff. Every dollar accounted for. The IRS has already been notified, and taxes will be paid according to the law." Morrison nodded, looking relieved. Good. That's what I told them, but they wanted me to verify." He hesitated, then added, "My daughter, she's been wanting to go to college, pre-med, but we can't afford it. I heard maybe you folks might be setting up some kind of scholarship fund." Maya smiled. "We are. Have her apply when we announce it." His eyes got watery. "Thank you. Really. Thank you." After he left, the floodgates opened. Within a week, dozens of people had come by. Some with legitimate needs, some with wild schemes, some just wanting to see if the rumors were true. Maya and Ruby, with Patricia's guidance, handled each person individually. They didn't give money directly, not yet. Instead, they took names, documented needs, made promises to help once the foundation was established. And through it all, Maya kept thinking about William's letter, about choosing bravely, about building bridges instead of walls. 2 months after the probate was finalized, on a warm May morning, Maya stood in front of Harlan County Courthouse with her grandmother, Patricia, Dr. Price, and a small crowd of reporters and townspeople. They were announcing the establishment of the William Arthur Hayes Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting struggling families in eastern Kentucky. Maya had written the speech herself, practicing it dozens of times in the mirror at the small house they'd rented while their new home was being built. She stepped up to the microphone, a tiny 13-year-old girl in a dress that actually fit for the first time in her life, and she spoke. "My name is Maya Carter. 4 months ago, my grandmother and I were 2 weeks away from being evicted from our trailer. We were poor, scared, and running out of hope. Then I found something hidden beneath an old cottage on our property, something that changed our lives forever. William Arthur Hayes spent 63 years saving money in secret, building a fortune while living in loneliness. When he died, he left everything to whoever would find it, with one wish, that we would use it better than he had, that we would build community instead of walls. Today, we're honoring that wish. The William Arthur Hayes Foundation will provide housing assistance to families facing eviction. We will cover medical expenses for people who can't afford treatment. We will offer scholarships to students who never thought college was possible. We will create job training programs and support small businesses and do everything we can to help people in this county build better lives. This isn't charity. This is investment. Investment in the community that raised us, in the people who deserve a chance, in the future we can build together." William was afraid to trust people, but we're not. We believe in second chances. We believe in helping hands. We believe that when we lift each other up, we all rise together. So to everyone listening, if you're struggling, if you're scared, if you think you're out of options, come find us. We can't solve every problem, but we can try. And we will try, because William gave us the resources to do it, and we're not going to waste them. The crowd erupted in applause. People were crying, cheering, shouting thanks. Maya saw Dale Hutchins in the back, arms crossed, looking bitter. She saw Marcus Webb watching from his truck, expression unreadable. But she also saw Sheriff Morrison with his daughter, both beaming. She saw families from the trailer park, holding each other, hope written on their faces. She saw teachers from her school, neighbors she'd known her whole life, people who'd struggled just like she had, realizing that maybe things could be different now. That afternoon, they held the foundation's first event at the cottage itself. They'd spent weeks cleaning it, restoring it, transforming it from William's fortress into something open and welcoming. The vault beneath had been sealed with the bulk of the assets moved to secure accounts and investments, but they'd left one room intact as a museum, a testament to William's life and his final wish. People toured it slowly, reverently, reading his journal entries displayed on the walls, seeing the empty shelves where fortune had once sat hidden, understanding the full weight of his lonely sacrifice. And in the cottage above, they announced the first recipients of foundation assistance. 12 families facing eviction received full rent payments for 6 months, plus job placement services. 8 people with chronic medical conditions received full coverage for their treatments. 23 students received college scholarships, full tuition, plus living expenses. Maya watched their faces as Patricia read the names. She saw disbelief turn to joy, saw tears of relief, saw hope rekindled in eyes that had gone dark. This was what William had wanted. This was what his fortune was meant for. But the day wasn't over yet. As the sun began to set and people were leaving, a black car pulled up to the cottage. From it stepped a man in an expensive suit, followed by 2 others who looked like lawyers. "Ruby Carter?" the first man said. Ruby stepped forward, Maya at her side. "That's me. My name is Richard Webb. I'm Marcus's father. I'm here to make you an offer for this property and the foundation you've established. $10 million cash today." The crowd that had been dispersing stopped and turned. "The foundation's not for sale," Ruby said calmly. "Everything's for sale, Mrs. Carter. You're a simple woman not equipped to run an operation this size. You'll make mistakes, waste money, probably get sued. Let me take this burden off your hands. I'll even let you stay on as a consultant." Maya felt anger rise in her chest, hot and righteous. She stepped forward. "Mr. Webb, with all due respect, we don't need consultants. We need commitment. Your son tried to steal this fortune before we'd even claimed it. He threatened us, invaded our home, and made our lives miserable for months. Now you show up offering to help by taking control of everything we've built? The answer is no. The answer will always be no." Richard Webb's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, little girl. This county has ways of handling people who get too big for their britches. You'll regret this." Sheriff Morrison stepped forward from the crowd, hand resting on his belt. "Was that a threat, Mr. Webb? Because it sounded like a threat, and I don't take kindly to people threatening children in my county." Richard Webb looked around at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd just received help from the foundation, at the sheriff ready to act. He saw he was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. "This isn't over," he said quietly. But it was, and everyone knew it. The Webbs left, and the crowd erupted in cheers. People rushed to hug Maya and Ruby, to thank them, to pledge their support. And standing at the edge of the crowd, watching with quiet pride, was Patricia, who'd fought every legal battle. Dr. Price, who'd authenticated every claim. And dozens of townspeople who'd shown up not for money, but for hope. That night, after everyone had gone and Maya and Ruby sat alone in the cottage, looking at the empty room that had once held such secrets, Ruby spoke. "You know this is just the beginning, right? The hard work starts now, running a foundation, helping people sustainably, making sure the money actually does good. It's going to be complicated and difficult, and sometimes heartbreaking." Maya nodded. "I know, but I'm ready. We're ready." "You're 13 years old, baby. You should be worrying about school and friends, not managing millions of dollars." "I'm 13 years old and I found a fortune that had been hidden for 50 years, Maya countered. "I think I can handle this." Ruby smiled. "Yes, you can, but promise me something. Promise me you won't let this money steal your childhood. You still get to be a kid, still get to make mistakes, still get to dream about things that have nothing to do with foundations or philanthropy." "I promise," Maya said. "But Grandma, this is my dream. Not the money, but what we're doing with it. Helping people, changing lives, building something that lasts. This is what I want to do." Over the next year, the foundation grew beyond anything they'd imagined. They purchased the trailer park and transformed it into affordable housing with a real community center. They partnered with the local hospital to create a medical assistance program. They established scholarships at every school in the county. But more than that, they changed the culture. People started helping each other more, sharing resources, looking out for neighbors. The foundation didn't just give money, it inspired generosity in others. Maya finished 8th grade with honors and was accepted into a prestigious prep school in Lexington. But she chose to stay in Harlan County to attend the local high school because she wanted to be part of the community she was helping to transform. Her grandmother's health improved dramatically with proper medical care. Ruby even started volunteering at the foundation office, handling applications and interviewing families who needed help. The cottage became a landmark, a place people visited to remember that hope could be found in unexpected places, that one person's loneliness could become a community's salvation, that hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life, extraordinary things might be waiting. Maya gave tours sometimes, telling William's story to wide-eyed children and skeptical adults alike. She showed them his journal, his letter, the empty vault that had once held a fortune. And she always ended with the same message. William spent his whole life afraid of people, afraid of loss, afraid of trusting anyone. And that fear kept him safe, but it also kept him alone. Don't make that mistake. Whatever you have, share it. Whoever you meet, trust them enough to try. Because the only thing worse than losing what you have is never having anyone to share it with. On the 1-year anniversary of finding the vault, Maya stood at William's grave. They'd found his body months earlier, buried properly now in the town cemetery with a headstone that read, William Arthur Hayes, 1942 to 1976. He saved for a lifetime so others could live for generations. She placed flowers on his grave and spoke to him as if he could hear. I think you'd be proud of us, William. We didn't hoard it like you did. We didn't let fear win. We built bridges like you wanted, and people are crossing them every day. The trailer park you never visited is now a real community. The hospital you never trusted now helps people who can't pay. The schools you never attended are full of kids who have hope for the first time. And it's all because you saved, because you planned, because you trusted that someday someone would find what you left and use it better than you could. I'm still learning. I still make mistakes. But I'm not alone, and neither are the people we help. That's the difference between your life and the legacy you left. You had to be alone to build this, but we get to be together because of it. Thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your hope. Thank you for trusting that whoever found your fortune would choose bravely. She stood there for a long time, watching the wind move through the trees, listening to the sounds of a town that was slowly coming back to life. Behind her, her grandmother waited in their new car, patient and proud. Around them, a community was healing, growing, believing again. And somewhere beneath the earth, in a sealed vault under a stone cottage, empty shelves stood as a monument to one man's fear and one girl's courage to transform it into love. Maya turned from the grave and walked back to her grandmother. They had work to do, lives to change, dreams to build. The fortune was gone from its hiding place, but its true wealth was just beginning to multiply, not in vaults or accounts, but in hearts and homes and futures that would echo through generations. William Arthur Hayes had spent 63 years saving for a day he'd never see. But Maya Carter, a poor 12-year-old girl with more courage than money, had made sure that day finally came. And it was more beautiful than he ever could have imagined. 2 years later, Maya sat in the refurbished cottage, now officially the William Arthur Hayes Foundation headquarters, working on scholarship applications. She was 15 now, taller, more confident, but still the same girl who'd crawled into a cellar one rainy afternoon and changed everything. A knock on the door interrupted her work. She looked up to see a young woman, maybe 19, standing nervously in the doorway. "Can I help you?" Maya asked. "I'm Sarah Morrison, Sheriff Morrison's daughter. I got the foundation scholarship 2 years ago. I just finished my first year of pre-med at UK, and I wanted to say thank you." Maya stood and walked over, smiling. "How's it going?" "It's hard," Sarah admitted. "Really hard, but I'm doing it. Because of you and your grandmother and William. Because someone believed I was worth investing in." "You are," Maya said simply. "And someday, when you're a doctor, you'll help people who can't afford it, and the investment will multiply." Sarah hugged her, tears in her eyes. "I won't let you down. You couldn't if you tried." After Sarah left, Maya returned to her desk and pulled out William's original letter, the one addressed to the finder. She read it again, as she did every time she needed to remember why they were doing this. "Use this wealth to bring people together instead of pushing them apart. Build community where I built walls. Create connection where I created distance." They had. They were. They would continue to. Because anyone can find treasure if they're willing to look beneath the surface. But it takes real courage to share it, real wisdom to use it well, and real love to transform it into something that outlasts the money itself. Maya closed the letter, placed it carefully back in its frame on the wall, and returned to her work. Outside, the sun was setting over Harlan County, painting the sky in shades of gold and promise. And in a cottage that had once held secrets, a teenage girl continued the work of turning one man's lonely fortune into a community's shared hope, one family at a time, one scholarship at a time, one life at a time. The vault was empty now, but its legacy was everywhere. In the houses that didn't foreclose, in the medical bills that got paid, in the college students who broke cycles of poverty, in the jobs created and the futures secured and the dreams that refused to die. William Arthur Hayes had buried his wealth beneath the earth. Maya Carter had lifted it into the light. And that light would shine for generations to come, all because a poor little girl found an abandoned cottage and had the courage to look beneath its surface, to trust in possibility, to believe that sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't the ones we keep, but the ones we give away. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories of courage, discovery, and the power of hope are waiting for you. Click to continue this journey with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe that hidden blessings can change the world.